The gunshot that took her father's life echoed through the mining office just as Victoria Preston reached the doorway, her worn boots frozen on the threshold while his body crumpled behind the mahogany desk. Knight's Ferry, California had seen its share of violence in the spring of 1878, but nothing prepared her for the sight of her father's blood pooling across the ledgers he had kept so meticulously for the Golden Eagle Mining Company. The shooter escaped through the back window before she could even scream, leaving her standing in that cramped office with nothing but a corpse and the devastating realization that everything she knew was about to crumble. The sheriff came and went, took notes, asked questions she could barely answer through her shock. Her father had been the company accountant, honest to a fault, and she could not fathom why anyone would want him dead. But as the days crawled past his funeral, as she sorted through his belongings in their small rented house on the edge of town, the truth began revealing itself in fragments. Her father had discovered discrepancies in the mine's books, shortages that added up to thousands of dollars. He had been preparing to report it to the company owner in San Francisco. Someone had silenced him before he could. Within a week, the mining company evicted her. The house belonged to them, they said, and was needed for a new foreman and his family. Victoria packed what little she owned into a single trunk and a carpet bag, sold what furniture she could for pennies on the dollar, and found herself standing on the dusty main street of Knight's Ferry with nowhere to go. Her mother had died giving birth to her 22 years ago, and her father had been her only family. She had no siblings, no aunts or uncles, no cousins to turn to. The few friends she had made in the 2 years they had lived in Knight's Ferry had distanced themselves quickly, as if her misfortune might be contagious. She tried to find work. The general store did not need help. The hotel already had chambermaids. The saloon owner looked her up and down with eyes that made her skin crawl and offered her a job that had nothing to do with serving drinks. She walked out before he finished his proposition. By the end of the second week, her money had run down to $3.40. She spent 50 cents on a room at the cheapest boarding house, the kind of place where the walls were so thin she could hear every cough and argument from the neighboring rooms. She spent another 30 cents on bread and cheese that had to last her 2 days. On the third week, she could not afford even that boarding house. The landlady, a hard-faced woman named Mrs. Chen who had shown her a sliver of kindness at first, apologized but said she could not run a charity. Victoria understood. She did not argue. She simply gathered her trunk and carpet bag and walked out into the harsh afternoon sun, wondering what came next. That night, she slept behind the livery stable, curled up against her trunk with her carpet bag as a pillow. The April air turned cold after sunset, and she shivered through the darkness, dozing in fitful stretches. When dawn broke, she was stiff and exhausted, her dress covered in dust and hay. She washed her face at the public pump, aware of the stares from early morning passers-by who recognized her decline. Shame burned through her, but she held her head up. Her father had raised her to be strong, but strength only carried her so far. By the 4th week after her father's death, she had not eaten in 3 days. Her stomach cramped with hunger, and her head felt light and disconnected from her body. She had sold everything she could sell except the clothes on her back and one dress in her carpet bag. Her trunk was gone, traded to a junk dealer for $1 that had bought her 2 meals 4 days ago. She spent her days walking the outskirts of town, looking for work at the surrounding ranches, but no one wanted to hire a woman alone with no references and no family. Some ranchers turned her away politely. Others laughed. She stopped sleeping behind the livery stable when the owner threatened to have her arrested for trespassing. Instead, she found a small grove of cottonwood trees near the Stanislaus River, about a mile from town. It was not much, but the trees provided some shelter, and the river gave her water to drink. She knew she was dying slowly. Without food, without hope, her body was giving up. She thought about her father, about how hard he had worked to give her a good life, and the injustice of it all felt like a weight crushing her chest. On the 28th day after her father's murder, Victoria woke up in her grove of trees and could not find the strength to stand. Her vision swam with black spots, and her limbs felt like they belonged to someone else. She lay there on the hard ground, staring up through the cottonwood branches at the pale blue sky, and thought that maybe this was how it ended. Maybe she would just fade away here and someone would find her body eventually, and that would be that. No family to mourn her, no one to remember her name. She closed her eyes and let the darkness creep in around the edges of her consciousness. She was so tired, so hungry, so utterly alone. The sound of a horse's hooves brought her back. She heard them approaching through the trees, slow and steady, and then they stopped. She could not open her eyes, could not move, could not call out even if she wanted to, "Jesus Christ." The voice was male, rough with surprise and concern. She felt him kneel beside her, felt a warm hand on her forehead. Miss, can you hear me?" She managed to open her eyes to slits. The man leaning over her was young, maybe 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell across his forehead. He wore a dusty brown hat, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A cowboy, she thought dimly. His eyes were a striking light brown, almost amber, and they were filled with worry. "Miss, when did you last eat?" he asked. She tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. No sound came out. The cowboy stood quickly and returned a moment later with a canteen. He lifted her head gently and held the canteen to her lips. "Slow," he said, "just a little at a time." The water was the best thing she had ever tasted. She wanted to gulp it down, but he controlled the flow, giving her small sips until her throat felt functional again. 3 days, she whispered. "Maybe 4, I lost count." His jaw tightened. "You have been out here alone with no food," she nodded weakly. "What is your name?" "Victoria." "Victoria Preston. I am Ethan Miller." He sat back on his heels, studying her with those intense amber eyes. "What happened to you?" The whole story came out in broken fragments. Her father's murder, the eviction, the failed job searches, the slow descent into starvation. She did not cry while she told it. She had no tears left. She just recited the facts in a flat, hollow voice while Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are not alone in this world." Those words hit her harder than anything else. She had felt so utterly isolated, so completely abandoned, that hearing someone acknowledge her existence, her worth, her humanity, cracked something open inside her. A sob broke from her throat, and then another, and suddenly she was crying after all, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Ethan did not tell her to stop. He just waited, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder until the storm passed. When she finally quieted, exhausted and embarrassed, he said, "I am taking you to my ranch. You need food and rest, and then we are going to figure out what comes next." "I cannot," she whispered. "I have no money. I cannot pay you." "Did I ask for payment?" He said it gently, without reproach. "Come on, let me help you up." He supported most of her weight as he got her to her feet. Her legs shook, barely holding her. He brought his horse over, a sturdy bay gelding, and lifted her onto the saddle as easily as if she weighed nothing. Then he swung up behind her, one arm around her waist to keep her steady. "Where is your carpetbag?" he asked. She gestured weakly to where it lay half hidden under a cottonwood root. He retrieved it and tied it to the saddle. Then they were moving. the horse walking at an easy pace while Victoria leaned back against Ethan's solid chest. She should have felt afraid, she supposed. She did not know this man. But she was too tired to be afraid, and something in his manner made her feel safe for the first time in weeks. The Miller Ranch lay 5 miles west of Knight's Ferry, nestled in a valley where the grass grew thick and golden. It was not a large spread, maybe 300 acres, but it was well maintained. A modest 2-story house stood at the center, painted white with green shutters. A barn and several outbuildings clustered nearby. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see a vegetable garden behind the house. Ethan rode straight to the house and called out, "Ma!" A woman emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled back in a bun and kind blue eyes that took in the situation instantly. "Ethan, who is this?" "Her name is Victoria Preston. I found her collapsed by the river. She has not eaten in days." His mother was already moving, coming down the porch steps with her arms outstretched. "Bring her inside, quickly now." Between the two of them, they got Victoria into the house and settled on a sofa in the front room. Ethan's mother, who introduced herself as Catherine Miller, disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bowl of broth and some soft bread. "Eat slowly," Catherine instructed, sitting beside her. "Your stomach will rebel if you eat too much too fast." Victoria obeyed, taking small spoonfuls of the rich, warm broth. It tasted like heaven. Catherine watched her with a mixture of pity and anger that seemed directed not at her but at the world that had let her come to this state. Ethan stood by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the yard. "Tell Ma what you told me," he said. "About your father." Victoria repeated the story in more detail this time now that her brain was starting to function again. Catherine listened with pursed lips, her expression growing darker. "And no one in town would help you?" Catherine asked when she finished. "Everyone has their own troubles," Victoria said quietly. "I do not blame them." "Well, I do," Catherine said sharply. "A young woman alone, newly orphaned, and not one Christian soul offered a hand. Shameful." She patted Victoria's knee. "You will stay here until you are back on your feet. We have a spare room upstairs. It is not fancy, but it is clean and warm." "I cannot impose," Victoria started, but Catherine cut her off. "You are not imposing. You are accepting help that should have been offered weeks ago." She stood and took the empty bowl. "I am going to heat water for a bath. You are covered in dust, poor thing. Ethan, go find some of my old dresses for her. They will be too big, but they will do until we can get her proper clothes." Ethan nodded and headed upstairs. Catherine disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving Victoria alone in the front room. She looked around, taking in the simple but comfortable furnishings. A fireplace dominated one wall, with a mantel that held a few framed photographs and a clock. Crocheted doilies covered the side tables. Curtains hung at the windows, cheerful yellow gingham. It was a home, a real home, and the warmth of it made her throat tighten again. True to her word, Catherine prepared a bath in a large tin tub in the kitchen. She left Victoria alone to wash, and Victoria scrubbed away weeks of grime and despair, letting the hot water soothe her aching muscles. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel, Catherine was waiting with a dress and undergarments. "These were mine from years ago," Catherine said. "Before I had children and got broader. They should fit you reasonably well." The dress was pale green calico, faded but clean, and it did fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose in the shoulders. Victoria felt almost human again as she descended the stairs, her hair damp and combed, her skin clean. Ethan was in the kitchen, working on what looked like ledgers. He glanced up when she entered, and something shifted in his expression. "You look better," he said, and there was a warmth in his voice that had not been there before. "I feel better," she admitted. "Thank you, both of you. I do not know how to repay this kindness." "You do not have to," Ethan said. He closed the ledger and stood. "But if you are feeling up to it, I would like to hear more about what your father discovered in those mining company books." Victoria sat at the kitchen table, and Catherine brought her a plate of eggs and bacon with more bread. While she ate, she told them everything she remembered. Her father had mentioned discrepancies in the payroll, miners who were listed as employees but whom he had never seen at the mine. He had found invoices for equipment that had never been delivered. Someone was skimming money, a lot of it, and covering their tracks with false records. "Did he tell anyone besides you?" Ethan asked. "He wrote a letter to the company owner in San Francisco. I found a draft of it in his papers, but I do not know if he sent it before he was killed." Ethan and Catherine exchanged a look. "You are thinking what I am thinking," Catherine said. "That someone at the mine killed him to keep him quiet," Ethan finished. "And now they think the problem is solved." "But they do not know that I know," Victoria said slowly. "My father kept his papers at home. I have been carrying them in my carpetbag." Ethan leaned forward. "Do you still have them?" "Yes, everything." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Then maybe we can get justice for your father after all." Over the next few days, Victoria regained her strength. Catherine fed her regularly, insisted she rest, and treated her like a daughter. Ethan spent hours going through her father's papers, his expression growing grimmer with each page. He explained that he had some education, had even spent a year at a school in Sacramento before his father died, and he had to return to run the ranch. He understood bookkeeping, could see the patterns of theft and deception that her father had uncovered. "This is bigger than I thought," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Whoever is behind this has stolen at least $30,000 over the past 2 years." Victoria gasped. 30,000, at least, maybe more. He looked at her, his amber eyes serious. "If we expose this, there will be consequences. Powerful people will be angry. You could be in danger." "I am already in danger," she said quietly. "They killed my father. What is to stop them from killing me if they find out I have his papers? That is exactly my point. We need to be careful." He paused, then added, "I will not let anything happen to you, Victoria. I promise." The way he said her name, soft and earnest, made her heart skip. She had been so focused on survival that she had not really looked at him, not as a man. But now, in the golden light of the setting sun, she saw him clearly. The strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the kindness in his eyes. He was handsome, yes, but it was more than that. He had saved her life. He had given her hope when she had none. He had seen her at her absolute lowest, covered in dirt and half-starved, and he had treated her with dignity and respect. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Helping me, I mean." "You do not know me." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the hills. "When I was 15, my father died in a riding accident, left Ma alone with me and my 2 younger sisters to raise. We almost lost the ranch. People in town turned their backs on us, said a woman could not run a spread like this, that we should sell and move to the city. But a few people helped. Old man Cartwright, he owned the neighboring ranch. He loaned us money interest-free to get through that first year. Mrs. Yee at the general store extended us credit. The foreman my father had hired, Diego, he stayed on even when we could not pay him regular wages for 6 months. He turned to look at her. "Those people saved us. They did not have to, but they did." And I learned that sometimes the difference between surviving and going under is one person willing to reach out a hand. "Where are your sisters now?" Victoria asked. "Mary married a rancher up north, near Redding. She has 3 kids. Lucy married a shopkeeper in Sacramento. They just had their first baby. He smiled. Mom misses them, but she is proud of them, and you stayed. Someone had to run the ranch, and I love this place. It is home. He glanced at her. What about you? If you could do anything, go anywhere, what would you do? No one had ever asked her that. She thought about it, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. I used to help my father with his bookkeeping, she said slowly. I was good at it. I liked the precision of it, the way numbers told a story if you knew how to read them. I thought maybe I could do that for a living, keep books for businesses. But no one will hire a woman for that kind of work. I would, Ethan said. She turned to stare at him. What? I am terrible at keeping the ranch books. I do it because I have to, but I hate it and I make mistakes. If you wanted, once all this mess with the mine is sorted out, you could keep the books for the Miller Ranch. I would pay you a fair wage. Ethan, I cannot accept charity. It is not charity, it is a job. You just said you are good at it. He met her eyes. Think about it at least. She nodded, her throat tight with emotion. A job. A real job doing work she enjoyed. The possibility of a future that did not involve starving by a river. It felt too good to be true. The next day, Ethan rode into Knight's Ferry to talk to the sheriff. Victoria stayed at the ranch, helping Catherine with the cooking and cleaning, trying to make herself useful. She felt stronger each day, the hollow look fading from her cheeks, the shaking leaving her hands. Catherine chatted with her while they worked, asking about her childhood, her interests, her thoughts on everything from the weather to politics. It felt like having a mother, or at least how Victoria imagined having a mother might feel. When Ethan returned that evening, his expression was grim. The sheriff will not do anything, he said. I showed him copies of your father's notes, explained the discrepancies. He said it was a company matter, not a law enforcement matter. Told me to take it up with the mine owner in San Francisco. So he is either incompetent or being paid to look the other way, Catherine said sharply. My guess is the latter. Ethan paced the kitchen. All right. New plan. We take this directly to the owner in San Francisco. I will write to him, send copies of the documents, and request a meeting. That could take weeks, Victoria said. Then we wait weeks. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Unless you have a better idea. She did not, so they waited. Ethan wrote a detailed letter to the owner of the Golden Eagle Mining Company, a man named Howard Chen, explaining the situation and including meticulous copies of her father's findings. He sent it by express mail, which cost a small fortune but guaranteed faster delivery. While they waited for a response, Victoria settled into life at the Miller Ranch. She started keeping the ranch books, just as Ethan had suggested, and found that he had not been exaggerating about his poor bookkeeping. She spent days sorting through his chaotic ledgers, correcting errors, organizing expenses and income into clear categories. It was satisfying work, and she loved the feeling of being useful, of earning her keep. She also found herself spending more and more time with Ethan. He would finish his work in the evening and find her on the porch, and they would talk for hours. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk, about his dreams of expanding the herd and maybe breeding horses. She told him about traveling with her father, moving from mining town to mining town as he followed work, about the loneliness of never staying anywhere long enough to make real friends. You have a friend now, he said one night, and the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken. Just a friend. She asked, feeling bold. He smiled, slow and warm. I hope for more than that, if I am being honest. Her heart hammered in her chest. Ethan, I have nothing. No money, no family, no prospects beyond the job you gave me out of kindness. Victoria. He reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. I do not care about any of that. I care about you. The woman who survived things that would have broken most people. The woman who is smart and kind and braver than she knows. He paused, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I am falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I saw you lying under those cottonwood trees and realized that the world almost let you slip away unnoticed. Tears pricked her eyes. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. I did not think I could feel anything after my father died, after everything that happened, but you brought me back to life. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want to. His lips met hers, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as she responded. It was her first kiss and it felt like coming home. They broke apart, both breathing hard, and Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, he said. Court you properly. Ask you to marry me when the time is right, build a life with you. Yes, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes to all of that. Catherine was delighted when they told her the next morning. I knew it, she said, hugging Victoria tight. I saw the way you two looked at each other. Oh, my dear girl, I am so happy. The response from Howard Chen arrived 3 weeks later. The letter was brief but promising. He was disturbed by the information they had sent and would be traveling to Knight's Ferry personally to investigate. He would arrive in 2 weeks and requested a meeting with Victoria and anyone else who had information about the matter. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Ethan and Catherine both insisted that Victoria stay close to the ranch, worried that whoever had killed her father might realize she was still a threat. Ethan even took to carrying his rifle with him when he worked, though he tried to downplay it when Victoria expressed concern. Just being cautious, he said. I am sure everything will be fine. But everything was not fine. 3 days before Howard Chen was due to arrive, Victoria was hanging laundry behind the house when she heard a horse approaching fast. She looked up to see a man she recognized, Gerald Thompson, the foreman at the Golden Eagle mine. He was a big man with a mean face, and he reined his horse to a stop far too close to her, making her stumble back. Miss Preston, he said, his voice cold. Heard you have been spreading lies about the mine. I am not spreading lies, she said, forcing herself to stand straight. I am telling the truth about what my father discovered. Your father was a fool who did not know when to mind his own business, Thompson said. And it looks like you are the same. Ethan came around the corner of the house at a run, his rifle in his hands. Get off my property, he said, his voice deadly calm. Thompson looked at him and laughed. Or what, cowboy, you will shoot me, if I have to. The 2 men stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Thompson spat on the ground and turned his horse. This is not over, he said. You are making powerful enemies. He rode off at a gallop, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Victoria realized she was shaking. Ethan set his rifle aside and pulled her into his arms. He killed my father, she said against his chest. I know it. That man killed my father. We will prove it, Ethan said. I promise you we will prove it. They told the sheriff about Thompson's visit, though they did not expect much. True to form, the sheriff said there was nothing he could do about a man riding onto property and having a conversation. No law broken, he said. Ethan nearly punched him. Howard Chen arrived on schedule, a distinguished-looking Chinese man in his 60s with sharp eyes and an air of authority. He came with a lawyer and an accountant, and they spent 2 days going through every document Victoria and Ethan provided. They interviewed Victoria at length, asked her to recount everything her father had told her, every detail she could remember. It was exhausting and painful, but she pushed through, determined to see justice done. On the 3rd day, Howard Chen called them into the room he had rented at the hotel. His expression was grave. Miss Preston, I owe you an apology, he said. Your father tried to warn me, and I did not take his concerns seriously enough. I thought he was mistaken, that there had to be a logical explanation. I delayed my visit, and in that time he was murdered. That blood is partially on my hands. You did not pull the trigger, Victoria said quietly. No, but I failed to act when I should have. He gestured to the papers spread across the table. My accountant has verified your father's findings. Someone has been systematically stealing from my company for over 2 years. The evidence points clearly to Gerald Thompson, the mine foreman. He has been creating ghost employees, falsifying equipment orders and pocketing the difference. The total theft is just over $32,000. Ethan let out a low whistle. Can you prove it? With Miss Preston's documents and our own investigation, yes. I have already contacted the federal marshal. Thompson will be arrested and tried for theft. And if we can prove he killed William Preston, he will hang for murder as well. Victoria felt a wave of relief so powerful it made her dizzy. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing me. I should have believed your father, Chen said, but I will make this right. I promise you that. Gerald Thompson was arrested 2 days later. He tried to run when the federal marshal came for him, which only made him look more guilty. His house was searched, and they found nearly $15,000 hidden in his cellar, along with documents that tied him directly to the theft. Under questioning, one of his associates cracked and admitted that Thompson had ordered him to kill William Preston. The associate had refused, so Thompson had done it himself. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Gerald Thompson was convicted of murder and theft and sentenced to hang. Victoria attended the trial every day, sitting in the courtroom with Ethan beside her, holding her hand. When the verdict was read, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It did not bring her father back, but it gave her closure. Howard Chen proved to be a man of his word in other ways as well. He offered Victoria a substantial sum of money, compensation for what she had suffered, and a finder's fee for uncovering the theft. She tried to refuse, but he insisted, and eventually she accepted. It was enough to ensure she would never be destitute again. He also offered her a job, keeping books for the mine. It was a tempting offer, well paid and respectable. But when she looked at Ethan, saw the hope and fear warring in his eyes, she knew what her answer would be. I am grateful for the offer, she told Howard Chen, but I already have a job and a life I am building here. Ethan proposed to her 2 weeks after the trial ended. They were sitting by the river in the grove of cottonwood trees where he had found her. She had avoided the place for weeks, the memories too painful, but Ethan had gently suggested they visit it together. I want to replace the bad memories with good ones, he said. If you will let me. They spread a blanket under the trees and shared a picnic lunch that Catherine had packed. Afterward, as they lay side by side looking up at the sky through the branches, Ethan turned to her. Victoria Preston, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person, he said. You have made me happier than I ever imagined I could be. Will you marry me? He produced a ring, simple gold with a small diamond, and held it out to her. She looked at it, then at him, and felt her heart swell with joy. Yes, she said. 1,000 times yes. They were married in the fall of 1878 in a small church in Knight's Ferry with Catherine and a handful of friends in attendance. Victoria wore a dress that Catherine had made for her, white lace with tiny pearl buttons, and she carried wildflowers from the ranch. Ethan wore his best suit and looked so handsome that she could barely breathe when she saw him waiting at the altar. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Ethan kissed her, Victoria felt a joy so pure and complete that it erased all the darkness that had come before. She had been lost, alone, dying by a river, and this man had found her and given her a reason to live. Now they were building a life together, and it was more than she had ever dared to dream. They spent their wedding night in the house Ethan had built for them, a small cottage on the edge of the ranch property. It was modest but cozy, with a kitchen and a front room downstairs and a bedroom upstairs. Ethan carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently. "Welcome home, Mrs. Miller," he said, and kissed her until her knees went weak. That night, in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, they came together as husband and wife. Ethan was patient and tender, mindful that this was new for her, and she loved him even more for it. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "I cannot believe this is real," she whispered. "That I get to have this, have you?" "Believe it," he said, kissing the top of her head. "You are stuck with me now," she laughed. "Good." Their first year of marriage was the happiest of Victoria's life. She kept the books for the ranch, and under her careful management, their finances improved significantly. She discovered inefficiencies Ethan had not noticed, found better prices for supplies, and negotiated a higher price for their cattle. By the end of the year, they had saved enough to buy 20 more head and expand their grazing land. But it was not just about the work. It was the life they built together. The quiet mornings sharing coffee on the porch. The evenings reading by the fire. The way Ethan would come in from a hard day's work and light up when he saw her. The way she felt safe and cherished in a way she had never felt before. Catherine remained a constant presence in their lives, often coming over for dinner or inviting them to the main house. She doted on Victoria, and Victoria came to think of her as the mother she had never known. When Victoria discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1880, Catherine was nearly as excited as Ethan. "A grandchild," she exclaimed, hugging Victoria tight. "Oh, my dear, I am so happy for you both." Ethan was over the moon. He fussed over Victoria constantly, insisting she rest, worrying about every little thing. She found it endearing even when it was a bit overwhelming. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him one evening when he tried to insist she not lift a pot from the stove. "I know, but I cannot help worrying," he said. "You and this baby are the most important things in my world." Their son was born in December of 1880, a healthy baby with a lusty cry and a shock of dark hair. They named him William, after Victoria's father, and the first time Victoria held him, she cried tears of joy and sorrow mingled together. "Your grandfather would have loved you," she whispered to the tiny boy in her arms. "He would have been so proud." Ethan sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, looking down at their son with wonder in his eyes. "He is perfect," he said. "You are perfect. I love you both so much." Raising William brought new challenges and new joys. He was a colicky baby, crying late into the night, and there were times when Victoria was so exhausted she could barely think. But Ethan was a devoted father, taking his turn walking the baby, changing diapers and helping with feedings. They muddled through together, and slowly, William grew out of the colicky stage and became a happy, curious baby. Catherine was a frequent visitor, always eager to hold her grandson. She taught Victoria how to make baby clothes and toys, passed down family recipes, and shared stories of raising Ethan and his sisters. The bond between them deepened, and Victoria felt the last empty spaces in her heart fill with love. When William was 2, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she felt more confident. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1883, a tiny, delicate baby with her mother's eyes and her father's smile. They named her Grace, and Ethan wept when he held her for the first time. 2 children, he said, his voice choked with emotion. "How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Victoria said, watching him cradle their daughter with such gentleness. "We found each other when we both needed it most." As the years passed, their family grew in love and closeness. William grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch, learning to ride and care for the animals. Grace was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had a stubborn streak that reminded Victoria of herself. She loved helping her mother in the garden and learning her letters. The ranch prospered under Ethan and Victoria's combined efforts. Ethan's skill with cattle and horses, combined with Victoria's careful financial management, made the Miller Ranch one of the most successful in the area. They hired additional hands, built a bigger barn, and even started breeding horses, which proved to be a lucrative venture. Catherine remained spry and active well into her 60s, still helping out where she could and spending as much time with her grandchildren as possible. When she passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1890, the whole family mourned deeply. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a willow tree she had loved, and Victoria planted wildflowers on her grave every spring. "She saved my life too," Victoria said to Ethan as they stood by the grave after the funeral. "Just as much as you did. She welcomed me into her home and her heart when I had nothing." "She loved you like a daughter," Ethan said, "and she died happy, knowing we were all well cared for." In the years that followed, Victoria often thought about how close she had come to dying in those cottonwood trees by the river. How different her life would have been if Ethan had not found her that day. She would have missed all of this: the love, the family, the home. The thought made her hold her blessings even closer. She and Ethan grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They welcomed grandchildren in the late 1890s and early 1900s, as William married a schoolteacher named Sarah and Grace married a rancher from a neighboring property. The house was always full of laughter and noise when the grandchildren visited, and Victoria loved every chaotic moment. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, Ethan took her back to the Cottonwood Grove by the river. It had become a tradition, visiting that spot once a year to remember where they had started. "You ever think about what might have been?" he asked as they sat on a blanket under the trees. "If I had not ridden out that day, sometimes," she admitted. "But mostly I think about what is. About how you saved me, not just that day, but every day since. About how you taught me that I was not alone in this world." He took her hand, his fingers still strong despite the years. "You saved me too, you know. I was just going through the motions before I met you. You gave me purpose, joy. A reason to wake up every morning and be grateful." She leaned her head on his shoulder, looking out at the river flowing past. "We saved each other then." "Yes," he said, kissing the top of her head. "We did." They sat there as the sun set, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life full of light. Victoria thought of her father, hoped he was looking down and seeing how well she had done, how she had survived the worst and found the best, how she had taken the love Ethan offered and multiplied it into a family, a legacy, a life worth living. "I love you," she said, squeezing Ethan's hand. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." And there, under the cottonwood trees where her old life had ended and her new one had begun, Victoria Preston Miller felt the truth of those words settle deep in her bones. She was home. She was loved. She was no longer alone in this world. They continued to live on the ranch for many more years, watching their grandchildren grow, helping where they could, and enjoying the peace of a life well lived together. In 1918, as they approached their 70th year, they were still side by side, still devoted, still finding joy in the simple act of being together. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the cottage that had been their home for 40 years, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. Ethan turned to Victoria and said, "If I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," she said, lacing her fingers through his. "Not even the hard parts. They led me to you." "And me to you," he said. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell, and the stars began to appear overhead. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and held on through everything life threw at them. Their love story was not the kind told in fairy tales, but it was real and deep and lasting. It was a love born from compassion, nurtured through hardship, and sustained by unwavering commitment. As Victoria closed her eyes that night, safe in Ethan's arms in the bed they had shared for 4 decades, she sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For the cowboy who had found her at her lowest, darkest moment and told her she was not alone in this world. For the family they had built, for the life they had lived, for every precious moment they had been given together. And in the morning, when she woke to find him still beside her, his face peaceful in sleep, she thanked God once more for the miracle of their love, knowing that whatever time they had left would be spent exactly as they wanted. Together at home, surrounded by the legacy they had created from ashes and hope. Their story ended the way all great love stories should, with two people who chose each other every single day, who weathered every storm side by side, and who proved that sometimes the greatest love comes from the simplest act of seeing another person's suffering and saying, "You are not alone."